Welcome all to this exciting session with a very prominent author and our friend. He has come on this show twice, and you all have loved his videos. He's a great author. He has commented on many current events, and particularly his video about the transition from an ex communist to a dharmic economist and political identity. You love that video, and that is a remarkable turnaround story. Many people may not like it, but today we are going to talk something else, which is concerned with all the American universities as well. We all know that how the leftist ideology is beginning to affect our institutions in USA as well in a big way, and through them taking the money and sponsoring the chairs, and all the how it goes. But this has been plaguing in India since the time of independence. Ever since the India got independence from Britain, and just few years after that, due to the Cold War dynamics and all kinds of stuff, a leftist ideology crept into India. And we have a fantastic person to analyze that. So let us welcome Sri Aabhas Maldahiyar.
Thank you. Namaskar.
Namaskar, and I hope I did not butcher your name.
No, that's okay.
So, Aabhas, you have been a veteran in many ways, in education system actually, based on your own personal transition from one
Yes.
camp to this camp, and we all know that education is so important. It builds the ideology of a person.
Yes.
And so, before we start off on the topic, I would like to say that what kind of education builds a person's character?
Yeah. So, as you rightly said, that I have gone through a transition from the so-called left side. I am not very fond of calling them left because left has to support democracy and not anarchy by the definition by which it begins with. But they somehow have been doing everything what should have been anti-left as per the origin of the term itself. Uh, while going through this whole transition, I have personally experienced that what actually should be the right way of education and what actually should be the right character of the education itself, which builds a right character of a human being with the time. And I personally have analyzed and felt that whoever is in power, indirectly or directly, whether there is whether there is in power in a pseudo form or they're directly in their form, they will try to impose or bring upon their own ideas upon the education system, because everyone wants to make the new avatar of themselves. Whoever they are, they just want that the new breed should be like that. And somehow in India we have failed to bring it drastically since the time of British, I would say, when the British came and the Macaulay took up the project, and it was all based on that if we demolish whole Indian education system, then perhaps there's a great hope for our ideas to propagate and we will be able to break India in multiple ways. And the project went on and on. And but with the time, we somehow failed to really bring in what actually made India so strong. There was something in India that all invaders always wanted to conquer us. There was something very critical of India, very important of India, that despite so many of invasions, they failed to convert it very drastically. So it goes back to the value of the dharmic education system which existed back then, that people give preference more to what they are, and somehow our culture couldn't be demolished completely. So I still believe that we need to get back to they are not dogmatic as has been perceived by many communists also. They are very modern and they are very much going to flow with the time, and it's a very open architecture. Being an architect, I often say that there's a very open architecture, and it will let us evolve much strongly with all the challenges which are going to come in the future. So there are a lot of challenges which are going to come up in the future. Right now, we have seen that there was a pandemic upon us, and somehow whole of the world has been able to take the cognizance that the virtue or the value of the dharmic tradition, right from the very much of the hygienic practices, and that would be very minuscule to point out right now. But the challenges which see upfront are really coming in a very strong form through the hands of the Islamists, through the hands of the communists, and those challenges are further going to really work ahead to finish the two projects, which one was definitely the Gajwai Hind, and the second challenge was definitely what the Britishers wanted to finish up, to demolish our culture and tradition completely. In order to counter those challenges, if we don't go back to, or rather don't adhere to what actually our character of education needs to be, then no one will stop us from being, we just vanquish. No one can save us if we just don't brace ourselves and prepare ourselves for the future.
No, absolutely right. And the you pointed out the right thing about the education. Now, in the leftist agenda in the US is to undermine the democracy for the political conquest by the same forces which are trying to conquer India. Same forces. Here also you have the forces of anarchy. I call them forces of anarchy, who try to destroy the corrupted person's mind in demanding more rights, and they feel
Yes.
entitled to those rights. And the fight is that if they get more rights, then the others are deprived of those rights, because rights is a common pool. Either everyone can get the same rights or somebody has more rights. So what do you have to say on
Yes.
that? Is that the main disease?
Yes, certainly, because what Marx sort of that, everyone needs to have equal rights, and or rather, everyone needs to. I break down this to a very in a simplistic manner that the Marx idea was that even if someone has grown up just having a weed and has not worked enough to really deserve something, then also according to him the person needs to get the same share of the rights and resources, everything, as the other person who has been meritorious enough, put enough effort to really build up something for the society, culture, and the world, and has performed day and night. So this kind of utopian, very evil utopian idea will at the end of the day demolish the mm, whole idea to make a world very competent, make a world very much meritorious. It will just kill any idea to pursue more of innovation. It will be disaster of any creative ideas to flourish in the days to come, because everyone will be relying that yes, we have got the Marxist backup, because whatever I may do, I am going to have the equal share of resources. I'm going to have equal share of rights. Then why do I even need to put a lever or do some effort to innovate or create or to manifest something? So that's what I have been perceiving it like. And in India, certainly, the way the Marxist or the leftist or the communists are trying to translate whole idea, the way they come onto streets even to safeguard the rights of the terrorists, they come onto the street to safeguard the rights of every wrongdoers. It clearly speaks of that they are just trying to impose upon what Marx had envisioned long back. And further, when we move on to really understand the communists of India, like how they became very prominent from mid of the 1920s, that is where they began the whole journey, and till the Gangadhar Adhikari's paper. It really speaks of that how they wanted to fragment whole of the world, uh, starting off with India because it was CPI over here. So like Gangadhar Adhikari goes on to say that if you are a Sindhi, Balochi Muslim or Punjabi Muslim, you just need to realize that you have to have your own territory. It's your right. And they wanted to bring in the class, what you can say, the class clash into India very strongly, and that is upon where the thesis was completely based on, and that is where all our dharmic ideas fail if you, because our dharmic ideas have only got one counter, that's the division among the classes. Our dharmic ideas wants to bring us all together. It talks about the nationalism, it talks about the national integrity. On the contrast, Marxist idea is about fragmenting the nationality. There are multiple nationalities. If you want a nation in a small room, they will say that it's okay, let's have a nationality for you too. So their idea is completely divisive, and it's very evident in India.
You brought up a very important point, and I think viewers should note that what you just said, that the Marxist leftist idea is to fragmentize people, divide people, and then use them for their own benefit. Because the more the smaller groupings are there, then they can exploit them. So the entire leftist idea is for exploitation. And I
Yes,
give a very classical example of Venezuela and also USSR. USSR was balkanized due to the same idea. And Venezuela is today the poorest country of the planet despite being the richest natural resources. Just 30 years back, Venezuela was considered on par or better than even developed countries. And today, it's nowhere. So the leftist ideology has brought only poverty.
yes, sir.
Now, I'll come back to another point which you said about the Islamic ideology, especially as far as the political ideology is concerned. Nowadays, they are picking back on the leftist ideology. So, left has become the new face for Islamists. But if you look at the Islamist countries, there is no economic success. Do you think they are essentially a leftist philosophy?
See, for me, the if I pick the left by definition, then I always say the left is no more left, because left was always pro-democracy, and that is how it all begins. That those who were sitting on the right, they were for the monarchy; those who were on the left,
Exactly.
they were for the democracy. So somehow, what we see in US, how Antifa is working and how they have incited the rights all around, it is, and they were one of the Communist Party of Germany was one of the competitors of Nazi back then in late 1920s. So they were no better than the Nazis of that time. They were just trying to throw off a democratic government over there, and that is when they started calling out the, the capitalists are your enemies, and all those kind of stories started floating. And then they became more of an anti-democracy, and that is exactly what really goes into the psyche of left completely right now. And when I pick the Islamists of the day, Islamists of the day are also based on basing their idea completely on the Nazi ideologies. If I go back to what Grand Mufti did in 1930s, especially the Muslims of the Arabia, the whole genocide of the Jews in the Palestine, the Mufti was very much aware of it, and he did it in much in a collaboration of the Nazis. At the same time, they took a lot of help from the communists also with the time. They started inclining towards, and there is a very interesting point in this, because Gangadhar Adhikari had quoted that what you can ask for as much nationalities or as much countries as you want based on your Islamic identity. So somehow, and we all, I don't know how many people would be aware of this concept of al-taqiyya, but this is what they would be ready to lie about the ideas of the Islam as well, if it is in future going to help you to succeed in the larger perspective of the Islamization, which is about Darul Islam. So these small fragmentations, which Gangadhar Adhikari has cited, or even Marx talks about that, nationalities to be fragmented and more countries should be created. This would help the Islamists to create a larger Darul Islam, and this concept of Ummah will work very strongly, because they don't believe in the concept of borders. Borders are just virtual for them. So slowly and slowly they will annex whole of a system, whole of a country, or whole of a world by this concept of al-taqiyya.
No, very good points you brought, and see the you have accurately captured the even the global movements like Antifa, which you are suffering a lot in the U.S., and how the in India the same movements are running through their agents like Kanaya and all those people from JNU. Now, coming to the next point about this education is that what solutions that we can have, because like we already discussed in the last video, who is left, who is right, and we already said that we are neither left nor right, we are dharmic. Now, coming back to what is the solution for this menace, I call it a menace because it's going to affect a very large population in the future and may create many wars based on this ideology. So, what are the steps to correct this education?
See, like leftists have always followed the concept of catch them young. It has always been that the moment you pick the NCERT books, the whole propaganda starts. And if I just go a little back to the idea of the problem as well, that how it all began, like in when after this Gangadhar Adhikari paper, it was clear that CPI had a very clear stand that they wanted to stand for the idea of Pakistan. They supported they were against the notion of Congress as well that time. They were pro partition completely, and they were shifting the goalposts all the time. They were initially against the British, again because of their fatherland. Then they became pro-British again because of their fatherland. Further, with the time, they were trying to hijack the education system quite evidently. But in the first initial stage of rewriting of history, when Jagannath Sarkar, R.C. Majumdar were working extensively to rewrite the history which was brought across by the Britishers. So there's an 11-volume series by Vidya Bhavan had come up, and it was a very nice project. Later on, the person who I found, Mr. Rao, who was before Narul Hassan, who became the HRD minister under Indira Gandhi regime, he had started the whole work of translating the work of Jagannath Sarkar into various various Indian languages, so that it reaches out to people as much as possible. But as quickly as Narul Hassan became the minister, he scrapped the project, and this project was taken over, and the whole idea and the books now started talking not about the little glorification which were there. That time our history books were talking little about our true history, but now they brought in the whole agenda of Brahmanism, the very term which was coined around that time. They started talking about the class operations. So history became all about the class operation. They wanted to equate it with the equation what Karl Marx had given, that we need to get freedom from the class operation. So that is where they laid their whole foundation that yes, we need our freedom back. And one song became very popular at that time. 100 में 70 आदमी फिलहाल जो नाशादे है, दिल पे रख के हाथ कहिए देश क्या आजाद है. So this whole idea of striving for the real freedom was embedded into the young minds. And we were too naive that time, whatever you may call us, or perhaps because social media was not so strong that time. So no one was able to understand the dubious game which the leftists were playing. So it was like, that's okay, it's just an NCERT books, we have to read and on. We understood that Akbar is great, and even Ashoka is great, and everyone who has been great was actually not great. There is a very different stories behind all those things. So ultimately, why this was being done, to support larger agendas, like then D.N. Jha came up with a whole book where he spoke about how the cow meat is a part of the Vedic Shastras. And then they started talking about, they forgot to talk about S.A. Dange, who had written who had written the apology letter, unconditional apology letter, just to downgrade Veer Savarkar. Because if Veer Savarkar's idea would have come up, then Indians would have integrated too strongly, and we would have had a very strong India that time. So their whole idea was, through the textbook, fragment India, tie them into the idea of class operation, the class politics. Now we will have to pick from them that they did catch them young. We need to catch them young too. So it will again begin with the school textbook itself. It has to begin, and at the same time, the teachers need to be inducted in a way, like if government needs to take up initiative, like when they're passing on the B.Ed education curriculum or something like that, the process of training the teachers in India. We do B.Ed education over here. So they need to be told about that, okay, you're talking about calculus, but you should not forget about talking about, even if it's not there in the book, you should talk about Madhavacharya. You need to talk about how it began with Aryabhatta. When you talk about the Fibonacci series, you need to go back to Pingala, and the Chanda Shastra, how beautifully the poems were composed, so that the student will start to understand that these shlokas were not merely the shlokas which are to be chanted in Sanskrit, but they were a lot more than that. They were just amazing. formulas. Like whole Chanda Shastra is complete number system. The sequence series and our music system is completely based on that. So once we induce a student that way, even if it's not there in the text, then they will start getting accentuated about our dharmic ideas very strongly. And then, like I always believe that it's again the process of market. When the grahak or the people who are going to purchase the goods, the students are going to come out of from that school of thought, then automatically these teachers will also start molding their things with the time at the graduation level. So we need to catch them at a young age, induce them to the right scientific path. It's very important that we go into the scientific path of India.
No, very good point. And that's the main reason we are starting Sattology clubs in every school, college across the world, not just India and US, but everywhere. Uh, Next point is based on your answer just now, I feel that the entire problem in India in the education system is from the leftist ideology, and obviously we have to replace that gradually or immediately, because it's if it continues, it's going to break India more than 1,000 pieces.
Yes,
This ideology, and also this ideology has been coming since the time Macaulay and Max Muller actually came to India.
yes,
The first step they did was create a doubt in the Brahminical culture, turn their own people against the Brahminical culture, and then people should have less faith in the Vedic literature, because Vedic literatures are not leftist, nor they're right. They're balanced. So they only
yes,
tell you the simple path, middle path. And I think any country which has followed that middle path has been successful either in national security or economy or the well being of people, and also very high standards of education, and also no hunger. So most of the European models and the American models achieve success because of the balanced approach. Now, and the leftist ideology, which was originated from Europe, from France, like we discussed last time also, it has killed France itself. Even
yes,
the France is in problem. There are riots in France regularly. There are riots in Greece regularly. So the leftist ideology also gives rise to political correctness, because political correctness is only needed when you want to hide something. And so I would like you to comment on that, please. Why political correctness is needed, and that will be the last point of this show, and we'll cover more in detail next show.
See, for me, for this, I need to define politics from my own perspective. I have seen politics as something that it's an art of playing ploy for the welfare of people.
That's right.
So, for me to break it down to a simplicity, that is how I have seen politics
Loka
always to be.
Sangraha. Loka Sangraha is the word. Loka Sangraha.
Yeah, yeah, actually, it can go that way. So, what it does is that if I have to run my nation or a state or whichever place, even if you start with the household itself, then at times you need to play the ploys so that the larger benefit of the people happens. And then we add correctness to the thing. The political correctness is nothing but the correctness that should adhere to the welfare, larger welfare of the people. So right now, even political correctness is a very dark term. It is not a very appropriate thing which has been which the leftists have been using. We like right now it would be deemed to be very political correct if I say that like we discussed last time when we were discussing the Mughals. Okay, Mughals were not that barbaric, so they are good. So this is the kind of political correctness definition which are imposed upon us from the left side or the side who are not at the dharmic onto the dharmic side. But what it does is that this does a very larger harm. It does is that you are not even able to acknowledge that what wrong happened with you in the past. This whole facade of political correctness lets not you to even believe to the fact that Tipu Sultan would have done the forced circumcision and also done the forced beefeating in 1782 just to validate that he has converted all the Nayars of that region into Islam. So in Karnataka, it becomes a lot of issue if you bring across those facts, and they say that you are not very politically correct. So there is nothing. So in my perspective, political correctness should be all about the larger welfare of the people. So larger welfare of the people in India or anywhere else is about making them realize that what happened 200 miles behind you, so that you can see the right in the right direction at 200 miles forward. If you're having problem looking at the backside in the right direction, then definitely you will not be even able to look forward in the right direction. So understanding of history with the right parameter is very important, and that should be the political correctness. There should be no facade, the double skin, what we call in architecture. There should not be any double skin to any of the fact. That would be the political correctness for me.
Absolutely. As an architect, I would call you an architect of the new India. So in many ways, you're helping in building a new India, as well as not only you, because in the America, the political correctness imposition by the media is so strong. The censorship of media is so strong that I had to literally leave Twitter. 2 years back, decided to leave Twitter because I could not stand it any longer. And the social media has become the politically correct tool, and also American conservatives. It's not just the Hindu people from India. It's American conservatives are also regularly banned from Twitter, including President Trump was last week was banned.
Yeah,
So the leftist ideology has creeped into social media also in a big way, Facebook, Twitter, and other places. So it's like a disease. It's like a pandemic which is keeps spreading,
yeah,
and somewhere we have to talk about it, and somewhere we have to take an action also against it on the ground. And like that, like you said, catch them young. And I think you and I can join together in Sattology clubs to catch them young everywhere, all over the world. So thank you so much, Abbas, and we'll come back very shortly with the next version of the same show on political correctness in a much more deeper way. Thank you. Thank you,
thank
Abbas.
you.
Namaskar.